abuse for 9 years and still be okay with it?
I'll just say it in one word, victimization.
All right.
And my book is entitled The Triumph of My Life, Domestic Violence and Society's Thundering Silence. And in my book, my reason for writing it is to reach out to victims who are right now going through abuse and they do not know that there's help out there.
Okay.
Stories are powerful, Paul, because there's that human connection. And you can see someone who went through it, they're out of it, and they're rebuilding their life outside violence. I am living a violence-free life.
Okay.
But I know what it means to be a victim.
All right. Before we even get to talk about emotional abuse, your kind of abuse was both physical and emotional, or was it just physical, or was it just emotional?
Yes, it was all those things. And at the point that you allow me to define what domestic violence is, I could explain that in a deeper sense. But before I go into that, I like to say that my book has already been published in my raw thinking, the raw material, the raw format, how I wrote it. And the 20 copies that Zulon Press in the United States sent me, I gave them to a few people, and they were bought by a few people. Among those people who read my book is Professor Ikiara of Nairobi University. And he said it is a powerful book, it is inspiring, and he was truly motivated that we can do something about domestic violence. And of course, the women who read it said it was emotional, they cried a lot, and I said, oh, I didn't mean to make you cry, but it's a powerful book. And right now what I'm doing about my book is I'm at the stage of editing, and editing in a professional manner so that it's able to be a good read, a better read. Already in the US, a church gave it a 4-star in its raw format. So you can imagine how it's going to be once a professional editor edits it. And on my Facebook, the Rose Foundation Facebook, we are doing a fundraiser because the book sales are going to sustain the work of the Rose Foundation.
Nice.
And
so the book is not available for purchase currently?
Well, it is in its raw format. It's available on Amazon. But we do strongly believe that once it's edited, then it will be a better read. And of course, bringing it into Kenya is also another project that we're looking at. That's why we're doing a fundraiser on our Facebook. The Rose Foundation Facebook is Prevent Domestic Violence KE, and our Twitter is @FoundationRose.
Foundation Rose. Okay, we'll get to the nitty-gritties later, and in terms of how people can reach out to you and so on and so forth. So you were saying that you'd like to define domestic violence. So maybe we can start by definition, and then now we'll narrow it down to emotional abuse. So kindly, go ahead.
Well, domestic violence is any act of violence that harms or is likely to harm another or puts another in imminent danger of harm. Domestic violence is the misuse of power. It's an imbalance of power whereby the abuser uses coercive power over a more vulnerable person in order to gain control of the other person. And the results are physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological torture, economic abuse, and sometimes we simply say controlling another.
Economic abuse, what is that? Like when my wife asks for saloon money, is that economical abuse?
No. Economic abuse is when the abuser stops. For example, I'm going to use the word he in this for the sake of this conversation.
No problem.
Because even the Bible uses he, and we understand it's covering everyone.
It's
so I'm going to use he. I'm not going to say he or her. I'll just simply use he. And then maybe just to point out, actually, women and children bear a bigger burden of domestic violence because there are more perpetrators who happen to be male. It doesn't mean that men are not being abused by women, but there are more women victims.
Thank you for the disclaimer.
So the economic abuse, it's when he takes her money her salary, which she has earned, he takes it and converts it into his own use, totally disregarding that she has a stake in that salary. Or economic abuse can also be ruining her employment or stopping her completely from working.
Okay.
That is economic abuse.
Oh, so the men who tell women, kaa kwa nyumba usifanye kazi, those ones are economically abusing their wives. Or the ones that take their salaries, zile za, okay, I know you make 30,000 a month, wekelea pa kwa meza nimechukua pesa yote nitumie. That is economic abuse.
Exactly. Let me put it this way. An abuser abuses his victim in the sense that they want good to be done to them at the expense of the victim.
Okay.
And we have said that domestic violence has, the form of violence is emotional abuse. So if we can touch on emotional abuse right now, is that concerning economic abuse, they can go hand in hand. It doesn't have to be economic abuse alone. Emotional abuse in an economic sense, it's when he takes her money and uses it outside the home for his pleasure. And if it's a married couple, then she's left without money. And as a mother, if they have children, no money to fend for her children.
Okay.
And only sometimes depends wholly on him to sort of give a little for when she asks for some money.
Ile anafinya na pima.
Exactly, a little ya chumvi, ya sukari, kidogo kidogo, ili aendelee kumnyanyasa. That is economic abuse.
Okay, now allow me again to bring the audience into this. Now that we have been defined for our question of the day, now that we understand what domestic violence is all about, from the economic part of it, from the physical part of it, from the emotional part of it, now let me ask that question again. What do you think is the best way for someone in an abusive relationship to protect themselves and family? What do you think is the best way, knowing what you know, for someone in an abusive relationship to, protect themselves from that situation and their family? You did mention yesterday during our phone conversation that these things happen right from short-term relationships to courtship and even to long-term relationships such as marriage. So can we also start talking from that perspective?
Yes. Domestic violence happens to either parent-child relationship. It can also happen among siblings.
Okay.
And it can also happen between what we call intimate partner violence.
All right.
This was a word which was coined by WHO to make sure that we encompass all kinds of relationships so that no one misses that definition, so that when we are taking care of domestic violence victims, everyone is in that group. For example, this can happen. Let me first say that intimate partner violence is the most rampant form of violence in a woman's life than any other forms of violence combined.
Okay.
And we are talking about conflicted countries. We are talking about street violence. The most rampant form of abuse for women is domestic violence. And 1 out of 3 women will face domestic violence, will experience domestic violence in their lifetime, either in dating relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend. You've seen what has happened to some of our university students.
Right.
A girl killing her boyfriend, a boy killing his girlfriend. It also happens in can we stay relationships, live-in arrangements, whether they are short-term or long-term, and they can be short-term even for a month.
All right.
Domestic violence still happens, or in marriages. So before, domestic violence used to be called spousal abuse. Then it came into domestic violence because it's left out the girlfriend-boyfriend relationship or the short-term relationships.
And sorry, I was taking some water, but if you look at that situation, the way people, for example, you've mentioned, short-term relationships, and then of course the intermediate ones, and then of course long-term marriages. Where does rape fall in? Is that is gender-based violence part of domestic violence, or is it apart from?
Thank you for saying that. Actually, domestic violence falls under gender-based violence in the sense that when we're talking about gender-based violence, especially in Kenya, we're talking about FGM. We're talking about early marriages. We're talking about wife inheritance. And then we're talking about domestic violence. But the danger of just encompassing domestic violence in GBV is that we lose the sense of domestic violence in the home as we're looking at gender-based violence, because gender-based violence is all those things, including street rapes.
Okay.
So we lose what is happening at home when we use GBV. So now
all right.
what activists and people who are doing the work that I'm doing are using the word gender-based violence plus domestic violence.
All right. Now let's get now into emotional abuse. What is emotional abuse, and how can someone who's watching this program be like, hiya, kumbe I've been emotionally abused all these years or all this time and I had absolutely no idea whatsoever. So maybe you can tell us emotional abuse. What is it all about? Is it where I insult you, call you stupid, call you an idiot, call you retarded? What is emotional abuse?
So we've said that emotional abuse is a form of domestic violence. And emotional abuse is either verbal or psychological torture, and in extreme forms, it's mental cruelty. You can know you are being emotionally abused if someone scares you all the time. You're scared of this person. If this person belittles you, humiliates you, embarrasses you in front of people. And I want to differentiate between what you've just said, someone calling you stupid. I know for sure that all of us have had a lapse in our behavioral patterns, whereby at one time we have devalued someone by calling them stupid. But what distinguishes that, our behavioral lapses with emotional abuse, is that emotional abuse is persistent and pervasive and an ongoing thing, because domestic violence is a pattern of abuse. It's not a one-time event. That is what distinguishes what you've just mentioned. If you just call someone stupid, is that emotional abuse.
Yes. So someone who is an emotional abuse relationship, what then are the signs? You've mentioned one of them. When you're constantly afraid of this person, when you constantly feel like you're being belittled by these individuals. But what are other signs that we can look out for, and we can tell ourselves, enyewe hapa sasa enyewe sasa imefika mahali imeanza kukua emotional abuse?
Okay, there's a list of signs that we can tell that this is emotional abuse. So all of them as a group, you look at them as a group. It's if you look at one in isolation, it might not necessarily be emotional abuse. So for example, let us look at the signs. Does your partner threaten to kill you? Does your partner threaten to kill your pets if you have pets? Does your partner, if you're a mother, stop you from having access to the children in the house when he's annoyed about something you have done? Let's say it's a baby who's crying in a baby cot, and you're a mother and you're rushing to nurse your child, and the perpetrator of abuse, the abuser, stands between you and the child. Those are the signs. Or belittling you in public, humiliating you, calling you stupid, embarrassing you, not listening to your thoughts, your opinions. He puts you down. He thinks that your opinions are rubbish. He doesn't want to listen to them. Only his are important. Because abusers have this sense of entitlement and self-importance, in the sense that they do not regard the opinions, thoughts of another to be useful or helpful. And because of that self-importance, they always brush their victim away. And because maybe what I should also add, the misuse of power is about controlling and taking the will of another.
Okay.
Because remember, we all have some sort of power.
All right.
And we also have people who are in authority who have power. But it is the misuse of power that causes domestic violence in a domestic violence setting, in a relationship. That imbalance of power makes the abuser more powerful and the victim vulnerable.
Okay.
So that vulnerability is what the abuser anchors on, zeroes in, and uses it now to torment, terrorize the victim.
And torture.
Constantly.
Okay. Let's take a look at what you're saying on WhatsApp, like we asked you earlier on. What is the best way to protect yourself and your family? And this is what some of you are saying. Hi, I really need your help. I think I am being emotionally abused. I am dating a doctor who takes up 2 weeks without talking to me, then comes back like we are all good. Sometimes doesn't pick up my calls or even reply my messages. What should I do? I love him so much. Oi, pole sana. Let's take a look at another one. Hello, I'm going through abuse in my 5 years marriage and violence at the same time. Planning to move out, but it's not possible because nikienda, he tracks me through my phone, na anajua place niko, then he comes and looks for me. I gave him the last chance, but he doesn't change. Please help me. Daisy from Meru. Hey Movie, for my case, I'm confused if I'm in an abusive marriage. He never bought us anything but himself apart from food, rent, and school fees. Second, he is so controlling, even on kids, and for now, kids are afraid of him. What? Okay. Between men and women, who is more susceptible to emotional abuse, since you have said women are more victims of physical abuse? Bernard from Nairobi. Thank you very much, Bernard. Look, we want to take a short break. And when we return, we'll try and answer some of the questions that you've asked there, especially that one who's saying that she's married to a doctor or she's dating a doctor, I think. And she's saying that this guy disappears for 2 weeks, doesn't answer calls. I'm beginning to think that guy has another family, because why are you not picking up your girlfriend's or boyfriend's phone for that matter? We'll be right back.